the main stressor on people is in their life. And the main stressor in life is money, generally speaking. It didn't make sense to be thinking about health and well-being without...
Hello, I'm Ruth Thomas, host of Comp and Coffee, where we break down what's next in the world of compensation management. From pay transparency to performance alignment, we explore how businesses are rethinking compensation to drive impact, equity, and growth. So if you're shaping the future of pay at your organization, grab a cup and tune in. Listen on the Work Defined Podcast Network.
Thinking about financial well-being. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Meg and Amy Show.
Woo, Meg and Amy Show.
How are you doing today, Meg?
Oh, it is good. I love the summer. It's, I like the extra hours of daylight. I like the getting up in the morning and the sun's already up. And I think, just enjoying this space that is a little bit longer days and, people are in a happier mood, I think, in general.
Yeah. Now, that said, I remember a certain November when you thought it was also summer.
Yes, it is true. It's entirely true. I'd never know.
I think it's always summer in Meg's land.
Or, well, I mean, if I'm feeling happy and things are good, then it's summer. Yeah, maybe that's it. And also just in general, I think even when kids were in school, I still always lose track in space and time because time goes by so fast these days. Like, it's really just hard to remember, like, wait, oh my goodness, it's another month. Or, oh, wait, how is it that it's almost Christmas again? These things just sneak up on me.
How is it that you have a college graduate and I have a half-done college student?
I was talking with a friend and I just feel like the college years go by so fast. I don't know. Do you remember it when you were living it? Did it feel like it went so fast? Because I don't think I felt like it went fast for me. But at our age, watching our kids do it, it's going by really fast.
Well, I was in the Northeast, and so time went by really slowly for me from like November through May. But the summers went really fast.
Yes. I don't know. I mean, it is true. Your life speeds up as you get older. But I also think watching your kids go through these particular milestones is really fun. I don't know what your summer situation's like, but my youngest is working, doing an internship-y thing and getting up early and is home for the summer. But my oldest, my recent graduate, is really on the grind, looking for that job, doing all the networking and all of that. So it's really interesting to see how this next step looks for kids these days. I don't know. What's it looking like for yours?
Yeah, Malcolm is trying to get a paying kind of basic entry job this summer. He has a research assistant part-time job that he's been working on for over a year, but he's trying to get something, to boost his savings, let's say. And he's just getting turned away. It's really hard. I think he's got an interview for a parking lot attendant.
Why?
This week.
What are the key competencies for parking lot attendant?
Yeah.
I don't know. Yeah. All right. Well, Amy, today I think we were talking and I decided I wanted to flip the script a little bit and talk about something that you have incepted into my world and elevated. And this is a particularly, I would say a little bit of an awkward conversation for me because, of course, with my background, the concept of financial independence has, it's something that's always been top of mind. But one of the things I realized is when you brought it up, you came to the conversation, to at least from my point of view, with a really different perspective of both intentionality and purpose. And so anyway, I just want to introduce the topic, but I really want to create a space where people understand the deep thinking that you've done about this, because I think this is something that most people really need to spend time on, especially those that are looking to navigate complicated, big careers, because I think this is a big part of it. So let's just start at the beginning. The topic is thinking about and being intentional about financial independence. And for me, this conversation between you and I started when we were talking about putting people at the center of business, and we were thinking about how to better support and engage employees. So when you brought up financial wellness and financial independence, it was eye-opening to me that this was a part of the conversation, and yet it was an oh duh moment, because of course it's part of the conversation. So tell me how and where you got to this as a starting point, and why you brought this up in the first place.
Yeah, so there's so much here. And it's a spectrum, right? So there's financial security all the way to pure financial freedom, right? So, and then maybe financial independence is in the middle or kind of overarching. And so I would say that it started for me from a feminist perspective as a girl, just thinking about having the ability to support myself and to not have to rely on others, and specifically a man or a father, or I guess a father is a man. Anyway, that was something that was really important to me as a child, as a budding feminist. And so that kind of keep that in the back of my mind as we kind of progress through all of this, right?
Just gave me a flashback. So my sophomore year of college, I was home for Christmas visiting the grandparents, and my grandfather, who I adored and was quite close to, took me aside and said, this college thing is really great, but keep in mind, if you could just marry a rich man, that would be great too. And I remember, back to your sort of feminism, I was horrified that I was having this conversation with somebody who I felt was really rooting for me in life. So yes, it is interesting. Yeah.
He wasn't joking?
No, he was dead serious. And, bless him, he was thinking that he was speaking, in my best interests. But I just felt like, wow, you don't understand what my goals are in life. So yeah. So who accepted this feminist point of view?
Well, I don't know. And in fact, I don't think I even realized at the time what sort of struggles women were having with money, in that near time frame where they weren't able to get credit cards or loans or own property, you know what I mean? Like, not that long before I was having these thoughts, but it must have been in there somewhere, I suppose. So yeah, I think it was all there was a little bit of rebelliousness too, where, my peers would talk about, being a mom, and I'm like, I'm not going to have a kid. That's what a terrible idea. I'm going to have a career, and I'm going to be, I'm going to make money, and I'm going to, do all the things, and I don't have time for all of that. And they'd be like, oh, but you'd be such a great mom. And
Well, what did they know? Clearly that's not true. Yeah.
So yeah, so I guess it was kind of my rebelliousness.
All right, so you started out young and eager to show the world your feminism and your rebellion and your I can do this myself. How did this evolve as you started to think about what does it mean for others?
Yeah, well, so I would say that there were two books that I read in my 20s. One we shared, you and I. It was called Nickel and Dimed.
Yes.
Right? Such a good book. And that one talks about this woman goes kind of undercover as a poor person and takes a job as a maid. She takes a job as like a factory worker. I don't know, all sorts of kind of like
consider parking attendant though.
Yeah. But again, like multiple jobs, full time, trying to make a living wage. And it just showed, how expensive it is to be poor, how nerve-wracking it is to try to make ends meet, right? All this kind of stuff. So anyway, I found it really eye-opening in terms of, the importance of financial security and how screwed up our system is in terms of being able to support people who are working hard at the lowest levels.
So before you get to the second book, so that book obviously was a really interesting moment for me, and back to the kind of like, you don't know what you don't know.
Yeah.
My neighbor recommended I read this book, and as I read it, I was like, I don't need to read this book. I've lived this book.
Right.
I could have told you all of these things. There was no eye-opening discovery for me in that. But what I thought she did really well was break down kind of what those barriers were and just how complicated they were. So back to like, it's really expensive to be poor. It's really difficult to navigate. And it is set up that every sort of step is harder in that space. So yes, anybody that has grown up with privilege or even just a normal life, I guess I would say, I do recommend that it gives you insights into stuff that you probably didn't really fully appreciate.
Well, and for people with your background, it gives you different words in order to explain your perspective, right? Like I think
it just uncovered the novelty for others about it. What I thought was obvious was clearly not obvious. It just was something that I had experienced personally. And the second book?
The second book, on the completely other end of the spectrum, was Rich Dad, Poor Dad. And then there were a number of little books like that, but it was all about like making your money work for you. But like kind of the initial, these initial books about like how to save consistently, compounding interest, being able to, make money while you're sleeping because it's, the interest and the dividends and blah, 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 like all of that kind of stuff. And so that one was really helpful in terms of understanding like a bit of an investment thesis and thinking about like how to shore up finances in the future and to not be worried about money at some point, right? So that was another really important part. And that one I shared with my husband. And so we read a bunch of these books and, started to think about investing in real estate and, how we were going to plan our, eventual retirement.
So early on, it was both a political statement for you, but it was also a little bit about a nerdy ability to think about and plan for the future. So it was very focused on what does it mean to me? When did you get to the point where you started thinking about like, okay, but what about the systems underneath and how could organizations care more about their workforce and how they could think about making it easier for people to be able to participate in some of these types of conversations better?
Yeah, I mean, I think that part really didn't come in until I joined SAP in 2017. And at the time, there was a really big push on health and well-being applications in 2017. And, it was all about mental health and emotional health and burnout and step counts and, and bias and, like just stuff like that. And all of which was important. But I kept thinking, the the main stressor on people is in their life. And the main stressor in life is money, generally speaking. And so that was the first part. And so like, it didn't make sense to be thinking about health and well-being without thinking about financial well-being.
Yeah, and I do think this is a unique space that is yours alone, Amy, in that when you see things, you don't just look at them in sort of broad systems way, but you also look at them from the human side of what are we missing on how does it feel and what is the experience of people. So I just read a few months back, Laurie Ruettimann put a provocative post on LinkedIn saying that the real career hack is to have money. And she was speaking to people who were losing their jobs, et cetera, but also doing what she does best, I think, in distilling what the core problem is. And so I guess this gets back to that nickel and dimed point of view, which is the systems are really tipped in favor of people who already have the freedom, who already have the money. And so thinking about how do we make that kind of better supported for more people? How do we get more people to that career hack of, hey, have some more money? What have you seen some of the best things that people have done that really tip the scales for people and really provide help? What are your thoughts there?
Well, I did just see, it was a few months back, I did just see an article about how Chipotle had noticed from engagement surveys or what have you, that their, primarily Gen Z workforce was really stressed about money. And so they started to offer some financial counseling benefits to help them cope with these issues. And so what they included was student debt repayment, pay on demand, as well as a special debit card that their employees could get that would help them build credit. Because building credit is huge, right? So when we go back to nickel and dime, one of the reasons why it's so expensive to be poor is that you have to keep paying top dollar for the most basic of accommodations, because you can't get a long-term lease. You can't buy a property that's going to becomes an investment and that sort of thing. You have to pay like the daily rate at a motel, right? Which is just absolutely exorbitant. But if you can start to build credit, then you can start to be able to get a 1 month lease and start to drop that down.
I had an interesting experience that even surprised me in this idea of working capital and credit worthiness. Years ago, this was back when getting a cell phone was a little bit more of a hassle than it is today, although it probably is still a hassle in this context. I was changing jobs. I had to change my cell service. I just go to update the billing information, and they refused me because they said I had a bad credit situation. I'm like, what do you mean I have a bad credit situation? Well, it turns out I had a fraudulent thing that I had to clean up on my credit. I had no idea. This was well before the period of time where you could find your credit report anywhere online. And it took me a very long time to deconstruct it. And in the meantime, the only way I could keep my cell phone alive and get some sort of policy is I had to pay a ton to just prove that I was worthy of paying the bill. And again, I was reminded, like, wow, if you did not have that extra working capital to sit around and, hand over to your cell phone service, then you would be, again, in a situation where you had to choose between, do you have a phone or do you not have a phone? And if you're looking for a job or something like that, that could also be very detrimental. So again, I think these things that seem small and trivial become the real material things that make a difference for people. So yeah, I really love the idea that both workers are caring about bringing these topics up, but also employers are trying to think about how they can do a better job in reducing the kind of stressors that get in the way of people being able to show up to work and focus on the work. So I don't think people fully appreciate how much is taken away from you when you've got all these other things weighing on you emotionally. So yeah, it's a big deal.
And it's really interesting. I was just having a conversation about Berkshire Hathaway and Warren Buffett. And, and Warren Buffett is known as, the king of capitalism, but also like a big philanthropist, right? But, it's kind of upside down because, as his capitalist self, he is so focused on squeezing out the most out of employees with the least amount of capital possible. So his businesses do not pay frontline workers well at all. Like, it's terrible, right? But then he has all of these huge philanthropic endeavors to try to overcome all of the systems that are in place that impoverish people. So it's like if you just paid like a living wage in the first place, then you wouldn't necessarily need to spend all your billions on trying to help people not be impoverished. I don't know. It's just sort of screwed up.
Yeah, you can't help but wonder how much of that is financial engineering as well into the system.
I
So
know.
we'll save that for another.
I know. So I'm not technically a socialist, but
No, I've already branded you. In fact, I've gone out. I've gone out on all the social channels right now and told them about you. So,
but still, just think about how much more productive your workforce would be if they were getting a decent night's sleep and weren't running to another job because they, and like
worried about childcare.
Weren't worrying about childcare or parent, like all of these things. If you could just pay your people a decent wage, then they would.
Yeah, I was listening to a clip from the Diary of a CEO. Stephen Bartlett and Michelle Obama were talking, which again, what a great opportunity to listen into a conversation. And they were saying that your relationship with money from your childhood is like another person in the room. It's a thing that you grow up with that informs how you see the world. And the thing about stuff that comes during childhood is it's when you're a child, the foundational things are how you learn to learn. So whether in your family it's a cultural foundation or a religious foundation or your foundation with money, these are things that become kind of part of who you are. And it is useful, I think, for all of us to ask ourselves a few questions in all of those contexts around, have I taken on these ideas with intention? And are these helping me to thrive for my own life and for how I want to show up in the world? And I try to say that without any preconceived answer, but I do encourage us all to remind ourselves that sometimes we go into default mode with these sorts of topics. And by being in default mode on how we think about financials, that can impact our relationships, that can impact our well-being, that can impact how we lead, how we think about and empathize with the people that work for us. And it can also impact how we look to ourselves to solve these problems. And I think in this moment where there's a lot of financial instability for many of us, I think it's a useful time to ask yourself these questions and then to also inform yourself about like which behaviors are additive or holding you back from where you want to be. And so I would like to shift a little bit, Amy, into the idea of what are the benefits when you create for yourself this foundation of whether it's financial freedom or financial stability or financial independence, like along that journey, what do you get for that in the moment? Because otherwise you're thinking about it, most of us would probably be thinking about it as like, what am I not getting? What am I saving? What am I holding back from doing to create this future state of financial independence and financial well-being? What is it that I get?
Well, let's pivot now. So we were talking a lot about like financial security and frontline workers and having empathy and care as maybe as employers, as leaders. But let's switch now to the other end of the spectrum, the kind of the luxury side of the spectrum, which really you can only even think about if you have a good paycheck at some point, right? And so that is a luxury that I have gained over my lifetime, as you have, as many of our listeners have. Not everyone can, and so I just want to caveat that. But this sort of luxury situation where you can have financial freedom is possible for all of us with that good paycheck. And the benefit of reaching a point of financial freedom is plenty, right? So first of all, it provides you mental levity, right? So it gives you the ability to take your job in stride. So if you didn't have, let's say that you had a great paycheck, but you were living paycheck to paycheck, right? You have a great paycheck, but you've indebted yourself to the point that like you are afraid of losing that paycheck. If you're afraid of losing that paycheck, then suddenly everything that happens in your job is incredibly stressful, right? You're worried about being fired. You're worried about, not getting that promotion. Like everything becomes worrisome and stressful. And so if you can take that out of the equation and you have that little bit of buffer to realize, you know what, it wouldn't be so bad. I'd be fine. I could get another job. I could take a year off. I could do something. I could pivot. I could do something else. I have that hack of money that Laurie mentioned, right? Then when somebody bullies you at work or things don't go quite the right way, or you've got a really, really important presentation, you have that kind of that objective sense of mental levity to get you through it, right? You can laugh a little bit. You can see the joys through the stresses. That's at least how I felt when I compare myself before I had what I considered financial freedom and after.
And what are some of the steps you took to get yourself to that point where you were convinced that you had built up that right cushion to feel more comfortable and more relaxed? What are some of the really practical steps you took to make that work for you?
Well, I mean, to some extent, it was a little bit of happenstance, to be realistic. So many years ago, I left my paycheck job at Oracle, and I became an independent analyst. And so I lost my paycheck, I lost my health insurance, I was the sole breadwinner for my family. And it was a little nerve-wracking, right? It was really nerve-wracking. But it allowed us to kind of harken back to the days of, college or post-college of, living on very little and, being able to get through difficult times. So just like really shrinking the, what expenditures were really necessary.
So
And
getting a solid inventory of the difference between needs and wants,
yeah,
and how to
right.
balance that with more constraints. So in your case, you went sort of cold turkey and said, all right, I'm experiencing, and I think this might speak to people who have just recently been laid off or in a similar situation. Since you're already in that situation, you're forcing yourself to get really clear about what can you live without, what can you stretch, how do you spend money.
Exactly. And there was this blog, I don't know how I came across it, but he's like world famous now, Mr. Money Mustache, which was like my Bible. So he was a guy who he and his wife were, engineers in Silicon Valley for, I don't know, 5-6 years or something. And they socked away like every bit of income they had. And then they retired at like 32. I don't know the specifics, but moved to Colorado. And then he started this blog about like how to not spend money, basically. So, saving money is is really important. Investing in money with, just throwing it into ETFs and just letting it sit, that's super important. But the most important thing that you can do is to learn how to not spend money.
Right. And so this is where a lot of times people go to the don't buy the avocado toast and quit spending money at Starbucks, which I tend to find a smidge reductive. But I think what they're trying to suggest is exactly this, of doing a really thoughtful inventory of what is the difference between needs and wants, and thinking about budgeting in that context where you elevate your need of savings to the same level as your needs, and then think about your wants as a smaller piece of that pie. So after you did your consulting thing and had to deal with a much more variability of income, you went back to a big job situation. What changed in you in that lens? Like, what were the steps you took then once you started at that big paycheck again, based on that inventory you'd taken and the behaviors you did? Like, again, what are some of the practical things that you did when the money was coming again?
The very practical thing is to believe, both in your head and heart, as well as your actual bank account, that you are not making a lot of money. So like it just gets taken away, right? And it gets put somewhere else and you never see it. And so the paycheck or the monthly income is way smaller than what it actually is. So mentally you can believe like, okay, this is what I can actually spend.
Right. So practically, some of the things that I did early on is exactly this. I would take my paycheck and take advantage of the ability that most paychecks you can put into multiple accounts as part of your direct deposit. I would obviously do your 401ks and things like that, especially if there's any kind of matching. Then I would have a direct withdrawal to my kids' college funds. And then I would have a direct withdrawal into a longer term investment fund. And then I would have my checking account. And my checking account would be the place where I would be nail biting every month of like, oh, do I have money for the nannies and the money for the this or the that? But it was also the place where if I wanted to buy shoes or whatever, that like it had to come out of that checking account. So if there wasn't enough money in there, then that was going to be sort of a self-governing mechanism. So a really good thing I recommend, and I actually suggest getting it to new college grads as well, is Scott Galloway's book, The Algebra of Wealth. It really breaks this down, but it also gives you some ideas on the investment side and walks you through some of the questions about should you rent or buy and all of these things, which again, the math changes over time based on interest rates, based on market conditions, et cetera. So where it may have been true in even when we got out of college, it was very true that investing in a house or real estate in California was something that was sort of a no-brainer if you could figure out how to make it happen. It's because of the way deductions have changed and because of the way that real estate and interest rates have changed, that may or may not be true for you. So I think it's useful to get informed on the mechanics of investment. But to your point, the first thing is to just get a foundation in place of how to manage what you spend versus what you save.
Yeah. Yeah. I think, you brought up folks coming out of college. And so I think, Gen Z has a very different landscape that they're living now. John Sumser, our, friend of the show, has been blogging about this a little bit, just in terms of is AI taking away jobs, or is it just changing the work landscape once again? And, we had a bit of a social contract in the, I would say kind of middle class and upward echelons of society where, if you went to college and you studied certain things, then you were guaranteed to have a good job and have job security and financial security and blah, blah, blah. And maybe you didn't have to figure all of this financial freedom stuff out. You had that, just kind of like base level of security. Like I still would say from that perspective, you still benefit from having an extra cushion and so on. But now, folks that are coming out of college don't have that social contract fulfillment anymore, right? There's not the same jobs. There's not the same career security from the past. And so really getting a handle on, how you can make your dollars last and get creative is going to be absolutely essential, because I think there's going to be a lot more variability in terms of employment and possibilities, right? And you want to be able to set yourself up to take risks, to try new things, and you need to be in a position where you can squeeze $50 for a long time.
One of the things that I also think comes into play with Gen Z that we're feeling, I believe, but maybe much less than I could imagine will be happening in the forward-looking years. And that is this idea that, ultimately, if we're going to be living to 100 or near 100, our working life is probably going to be much longer than it was in the past, or the way we used to think about working lives. And so I think it is really helpful to think about multiple iterations of your professional life. And in order to support those multiple iterations, you really do want to think about things like you and I have done, Amy, which is self-funding sabbatical time, and thinking about places that you invest in your own reskilling that is not paid for by someone else. So the same way you invested in your skilling at the beginning of your career by going to college, I think there is a need to be doing ongoing investments in skilling, and that may include formal education, or it may include a different type of educational experience.
That was how I mentally viewed that time when I was an independent analyst. It was like I was going back to school. I was developing new skills and so on, and so I kind of looked at it as if I was, paying for an MBA or something. You know what I mean? Like that's how I had to look at it in order to deal with the financial realities.
And back to the feminism thing, I think it is also true that oftentimes we struggle, I see it more in women, but I'm sure men struggle with this as well, in investing in things that are for our professional growth. one of the things that I've been really fortunate to have is, my husband pushes me a lot to invest in things. And early on, I've always resisted. I think it comes from my financial upbringing. But even investing in, things like wardrobe, things like, getting to be better at certain things, investing in equipment for podcasts, or investing in my own skilling, things like the TED conference, things that I've paid for myself that were very much tied to both interests, but also things that I felt were important for the phase that I was in my career. And so I think thinking about that as well, in making sure that you have put aside the kind of investment financials you might need in the future to support those different phases. So whether it's investing by jumping into something that pays less, or investing by going and spending money to unlock new opportunities, those are things that you need to think of for yourself, as opposed to what used to happen, which was maybe your parents helped you with college, or you took some loans and then you expected that to last your career and lifetime.
No, that's great. I call that an advanced spend strategy, because as those paychecks grow, and you are siphoning them off and that sort of thing, so you're keeping it smaller. But honestly, like at some point, it becomes really tempting to spend money when you're making money, right? And so how do you spend that money on something that is actually contributing to your financial freedom and not detracting from it? So rather than just blowing it on this or that, you're actually, you're spending it on a new outfit for a big presentation, so that you build your brand, and you improve your financials in the future. Maybe it's in a real estate investment, and so that's really fun to spend your money on, but it's actually creating cash flow, for the future, right? So how do you put your money in that direction, rather than like a Ferrari, or I don't know. I mean, I guess for some people a Ferrari could create a financial.
My husband keeps trying to make that business case.
I don't know. But yeah, I mean, so like, think about like what can you spend your money on that's actually going to contribute to your financial freedom.
Love that. So one last thing, and then we do need to wrap up, and that is this idea of happiness, and how is money correlated with happiness. I saw a really good breakdown that, and it was actually in Forbes, that talks about this, because I do think that oftentimes the conversations tend to be a little bit reductive around where spending money is increasing happiness versus creating an arms race of things that you feel like you have to be competitive with how you spend money. There are 4 places that they highlight that spending money does help experiences. So I think this gets to both learning and to how you invest time in general well-being. Spending money on other people. So thinking about how you bring generosity to your overall spending. Spending it on smaller pleasures, which I think your focus on making your overall budget smaller, I think makes you more purposeful in that. And using money to buy time. So this is another place where I feel a lot of people struggle. And I really do think that this is a conversation worth having. When you have a big job and a big paycheck, and if maybe you also have caregiving responsibilities, whether that's children or parents or other types of things, there's a lot of pressure on your time. This is one place where I believe you need to be thinking holistically about how you spend money and the opportunity cost of where you spend money. So for me personally, I spend money on a lot of things that other people might think are luxuries, getting help with, my outside landscaping, getting help with my inside house cleaning, getting help with a lot of tasks around the house. There are a lot of things that I spend money on, but again, they're all in service of, for me, how do I invest my time wisely, financially, as well as for the overall well-being. What are some things that you think are places where people might see extravagance in where you spend, but maybe in the way that you're operating your life become important for either happiness or investment?
Well, I remember when my son was little and my husband was a stay-at-home dad, we played around with putting my son in daycare for a couple days a week to free up my husband. And so that during those 2 days a week, my husband could clean the house. That went terribly. So then we decided, why don't we not put Malcolm in daycare and actually hire a housekeeper back then, right? And that was way better, right? So because the time that my husband spent with my son was joyous time, and the time that he spent cleaning was unjoyous time. So that I feel like was a rather important moment for us in terms of kind of recognizing like what to spend money on, what not to spend money on.
Okay, and last thing, what are some of the traps you accidentally fall into in spending money? I'll go first on this one.
Whenever Meg sends me a link to something that I should consider buying, that is a trap.
Yes. So for me, my big traps, I have spent a real fortune on hair things, hair gizmos, hair gadgets, hair, magic potions, hair treatments, you name it, all the things with the eye to, if maybe it would be easier, faster, look better. I'm here to report, no matter how many times I fall for those things, the place that they fall down is skill. In order for any of those great gadgets to work, you have to know how to use them, and you have to be able to use them at the level of speed as the Instagram video or whatever it is. So yes, for my conscience is stop with the buying of the hair things. I don't think I'll be successful in this, but yeah, it is an ongoing learning that it has never really paid off. How about you?
Well, I packed for a trip recently, and it used to be like, well, how many shoes can I fit in my suitcase? And now it's, which supplements am I bringing? How many of each? Oh my goodness, that's a lot of supplements.
Am I doing my protein job successfully?
Yes.
Oh goodness.
Right. And I had like this whole like comedy of errors where just before I was leaving for my trip, I realized I had run out of collagen, I'd run out of creatine, I don't know, I'd run out of like some of my supplements. And so like I ordered them like, to be like, Amazon overnight. But it ended up that I shipped them to the wrong location. So when I got home, I had like
a lifetime supply
of supplements, but not on my trip itself. So anyway, yeah, I mean, it's partially like experimentation, which is probably true, like with your hair products and so on. But I just have to remember to stop buying the old supplements and just the new ones. But yes, I am a bit of a supplement junkie.
I think we are in that age group that this will make you feel better. Oh yeah, I must have more of that.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Super, yes.
Oh, Amy, thank you so much for sharing your wisdom with us. I look forward to all of us enjoying more financial freedom and confidence that comes from that.
All right, Meg, let's move on to Leadership Corner.
Let's lead some corners.
Oh God, what a nerd. All right. This one's from a friend from the show. Ladies, I enjoyed your engagement episode. We run an engagement survey at our company, but nothing ever seems to change. What can I be doing to action the survey and move the needle?
Oh my goodness, the engagement survey. I just read a really interesting LinkedIn post on this about how the engagement survey often motivates the wrong things. So it is very top of mind in my head as I think about this. So let me break down a couple things. Number one, just so nobody is confused, I do think it's useful to do engagement surveys. I think it's helpful to be quantitative in how you look at things, and I think it is useful and important to have an opportunity for people to share their thoughts and to express their concerns. I think it's also very, very important to have context of what's going on with the business and what's going on with the workforce, both in the job as well as in the market, as you talk through the engagement survey results and as you think about what it is you're trying to move when you say move the needle. A couple really important things. You know, historically, I remember early on when these were just getting started and I was at Oracle, somebody pointed out to me something really interesting and useful, that when the stock price was up, the engagement scores were up, and when the stock price was down, the engagement scores were down. And
It's all about the money.
Exactly. And so while that was a window into kind of how things worked at Oracle, because there also was a tremendous amount of focus on people's share price versus their paychecks, I think the context still matters. So what is the lived experience for the workforce? That should be your baseline going in, for which you try to understand what they're telling you. Looking at the data without that and trying to move the needle on the data without understanding that is an exercise in frustration, because you don't understand where you're going and what your probability of success is. The second thing I think that people really get fixated on is wanting the scores to be good versus wanting the scores to be helpful. I am a much bigger believer of having the scores give me insights on where I need to expand my curiosity. So instead of looking for yes or no, or good or bad, or red or green in your heat maps, I think you really want to look at what is the overall feeling within the workforce and where are the gaps. And a couple things I would like to remind you. The gaps are almost always about communication. Even the ones that are about essentially compensation are really about communication. Because no matter what, you're working as a leadership team or as a leader within a context for which you have a certain amount of control and you have a certain amount that you don't control. But what's always true is that your inability to communicate with enough empathy and clarity of both what's going on for the business and what the people are needing is what you should be looking to understand in this. So it's not to say that you shouldn't be putting programs in place to try to improve the context and the results. But first and foremost, you should be asking yourself, what have I learned from this that is giving me clues into where my communication is not working, number one. And number two, you should not assume that those answers are the end game. The answers are the beginning of the next level of questions you need to start having. It should be targeting your curiosity and your questioning to the populations that are struggling the most. And so this is where I think you want to put your energy, not on what your scores are as the end game, but what is it that you're learning and how are you going to be able to communicate better as a result of that?
A couple things. So one, you talked about the context, and it made me recall kind of a funny contextual thing from data. So in one of my recent jobs, we had people all over the world, but let's say we had people in the US and we had people in China. And there were like these two questions, and it was like, I am healthy for my age, and I have an appropriate level of stress in my job. And in the US, like everyone was healthy, but did not have an appropriate level of stress. And in China, no one was healthy and everyone had an appropriate level of stress. Anyway, it was just a very interesting, like, cultural difference, right? So the context, not only for the business, you also have to kind of understand the context of the culture, right? And what people's expectations are, right? So people in China were willing to be stressed and willing to not be healthy, I guess. And people in the US were like, oh, I'm healthy, but but even though I'm healthy, it's too much, too stressful. So anyway, it was a very interesting, like, and a survey after survey after survey, it was always like that, no matter what we did, no matter what we changed. And that is really true in terms of what the person asking the question. It is really hard to move the needle, but the most important thing, I think, is to make sure that everybody recognizes that you are listening, that you do care, that you share back what you've learned from the survey, and that you solicit from people, ideas on how to improve. And in this case, what you were saying rings completely true. It's, about the communications, like how do we have, different kinds of all hands or skip levels or manager training or, but it can't just be from the top. Everybody needs to kind of come up with solution ideas based on understanding where people are.
But even in the coming up with solution ideas, being really clear that those are the actions you're taking to address these things that you've learned.
Yes.
Because without that, you just are going to spend a lot of money and end up in the exact same place the next year and the next year. Right. And I had somebody say, like, it's for them was inversely correlated. The high performers were unhappy at different times than the low performers. And so, again, digging into the question of what sorts of cohorts are struggling and why would they be struggling? Sometimes the things they're struggling about is exactly what the business needs or what the business is trying to do. And so sometimes in that context, your best move really is more tough love of being clear. I understand this isn't optimized for you specifically, but this is what is optimized for the overall business. This is why, this is what's going to happen. At the end of the day, that may cause that cohort to opt out or to be, unhappy. But again, I think clear is kind. I think being more clear as to what problems you are willing to solve and what problems you are not willing to solve or not able to solve, I think is part of what it means to be a leader.
And I think that there's a real possibility that you're only going to move two numbers. One is, was the survey actioned upon? Did you see clear changes as a result of the survey? And the other one is, I understand what the business is trying to accomplish, and I understand how what I'm doing is connected to that. And those may be the only two things that you're able to move for a while, because everything else takes forever. But those are, I would say that if you can at least change those two things, that is doing a world of good for your people, and how they perceive how much you care and how much they are willing to step up for you.
And I would also argue if you're accomplishing those two things, you're learning something in the process as well. So it's good use of your time as well. This has been delightful. It's been fun to have just another Meg and Amy sesh, but with Amy being the one that brings up the topic. So I put this in the win column. Thank you, Amy, for making this so much fun for me. Let's invent the future together, people. I believe in us.
Make every day count. Don't forget to subscribe and spread the word.
And to send your Leadership Corner questions, because we definitely like to have new questions to ponder together.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys. Bye.